how important is oxygen to breathing, because that's how important light is to photography. Opening up that shadow slider, boosting exposure, trying to throw all kinds of local adjustments. And that's all because the lighting just wasn't the way that it should have been on the day. You are listening to the Free Will Photos podcast. I'm your host, Chris Scott. My goal is to help you get your work out and into the world faster, all while keeping you inspired while you are creating. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another podcast here on Free Will Photos. Today we're talking about, is light important to photography? Before I dive into that subject, I want to make you aware of a few things. First, I updated the website freewillphotos.com. I'm now offering one-on-one training. So if you want to sign up for that because you got questions, you need someone to help walk you through a workflow, explain some of the tools that are inside of the software, and really just have that over-the-shoulder experience, then consider signing up for one of those sessions over at the freewillphotos.com website. A link is also in the description box that'll take you straight to the one-on-one coaching. Also, if you have any questions and you want to ask, hey, what is this thing in photography? You can email me at freewillphotos@gmail.com. That's also down in the description box. And then, of course, if you find value in this particular episode, please interact with it however your podcasting platform allows. If that's in the form of a content, if that's in the form of sharing, if that's in the form of liking, subscribing, following, whatever it may be, I greatly appreciate it because I just want to help people in the photography space as best as I can. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's tackle our question at hand, which is light really that important, or how important is light to photography? Well, how important is oxygen to breathing? Just think about that. How important is oxygen to breathing? Because that's how important light is to photography. Now, not necessarily that important, because if you don't have oxygen, then you'll die. If you don't have light, then I guess you won't have a photo. But the problem is there are times when you can go with lower light and it sets the mood. So I actually have 3 topics that we're going to dive through that talks about lighting in general and how important it is and why it serves the purpose that it does, because I think this will be helpful, especially for those of us looking for creative ways to interact with our environments and create photos that are unique and compelling, right? No one ever wants to photograph something that people are like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care to see that. We want to photograph things in a way that is compelling, it's enticing, and our viewers want to look at the photo and really examine it to see what is going on. All right. So the first thing that I have here when it comes to light, we need light to help us see the subject. Now, this should be, this goes without saying, I think, but if you can't see the subject or the main thing in the frame, then you don't really have a photo, right? You just have a black screen. So we need the light to help us see the subject. If you are a portrait photographer, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because if you photograph a person and it doesn't expose well and you don't get to see the subject, when you get back in post, you'll see, opening up that shadow slider, boosting exposure, trying to throw all kinds of local adjustments. And that's all because the lighting just wasn't the way that it should have been on the day. Now, that's not saying that photo editing is bad, because if you know anything about me, I edit my photos and I am primarily a portrait photographer, newly moving into headshots. And that is one of those things where if I don't have good light, I don't want to try to save an image with editing. I want to enhance an image with editing. So the light helps me see the subject and helps the viewer see the subject. And that's why it's important to have proper exposure in the camera. Now, that could sound very intimidating or daunting to have proper exposure in the camera, but really what that means is you are putting enough light into the sensor while it is exposing or capturing the image. So that way, when you get to the computer, you're really just tweaking a little bit. All right. Now, with raw images, we have the ability to pull back a lot of those details. And that's why I think we've gotten, as photographers in the community of photography, we've gotten a little lazy when it comes to capturing images properly in camera. We need light to help us see the subject. If you can't see the subject, then you're going to have a problem. And this doesn't matter what genre of photography you are primarily shooting: landscape, still life, product, whatever it may be. You need the light to see the subject. That is like very first reason why light is important. The second reason why light is important, at least the one that I jotted down here, is light enhances the subject. So earlier I was talking about pulling out the shadows and exposing the light in a particular way to make the photo or the subject kind of stand out. Well, that's exactly what we want to do with the light. And if we can do it in camera, it is amazing, because you see, light can be formed in different colors. It can come at different temperatures, and it can really generate a different look in your images that feels, and it just looks a different way than if you were to just take flat lighting or just any given lighting, right? So now we're kind of talking more about the shaping of the light, because we can use RGB lights to really fill in the frame and make a whole nother fill, which is going to be the third point. But when I say lighting to enhance the subject, what I'm saying is you're intentionally casting shadow and putting light where you want it to be. All right. So in some studios, there's something known as a flag, and this is essentially just a black card that goes in front of the light to keep the light from going into a particular area. And obviously, any place where light is not, that means it's going to be in darkness or in shadow. So the flags help with contouring the light around the subject in a very particular way. Now, you could do the same thing in landscape photography. Usually that happens with cloud coverage. You could also do that by flagging off certain aspects of the light using tree branches or bushes or something that's going to kind of block the light and narrow or shape the subject so that way it is enhanced. All right. Light enhances our subject. It is so important that we understand that, and that we learn to manipulate light to really bring out the best in our subjects. Now, we need light to see the subject. We also need light to enhance the subject. The last bullet that I put here, we need light to set the mood and tone of the image. All right. So if you were to imagine the lighting in a particular room, like you could look in the office here if you're watching the video podcast version of this on Spotify, shameless plug. But if you are looking at your own space where you're at right now, be it outside, inside, it doesn't matter. What is the mood that's set? Now, here in the studio where I'm working, there is no mood set. I'm still developing my office space because we just moved. And so there's just a white wall right behind me. However, you may be in a room that has warm toned lights that set a relaxing mood. You could be in a relatively darker space, which sets a different type of mood. You could be in a brighter space, which sets a different type of mood. You could be in a space where there is all kinds of dappled light coming through blinds or being flagged or blocked by something that's in between the light and the location that it's actually reflecting to. You could have a ton of different places or moods and tones and things of that sort. This is really, really important for us to understand as photographers, because when we can shape the light and set the mood the way that we need the mood to be set for our clients and for our photos and for our imagery, we are going to be unstoppable. And this is the reason why a lot of the great photographers, and even just photographers in general, they always say, if you become a master of light, then you will master photography. All right. Light matters that much. So to the question of is light actually important? The answer is yes. Light is super critical to our ability to capture subjects, so that way we can enhance them and set a mood and an image so our viewers actually want to look at our photos. Now, the great thing is we have these modern cameras that are really, really good at capturing the light, so we don't have to worry too much about the settings anymore in the camera. If you set auto ISO and you set your aperture and exposure, your aperture and your shutter speed, then the camera is usually going to do pretty good, because we have some really, really good sensors. Now, you can use aperture priority mode or the shutter speed priority mode, and those are going to deliver some great photos. So get out there, use your cameras, shape light. Light is important. Look for it, learn it, and it's okay if it is overwhelming at first. I'm still learning how to use light. When I got into headshot photography, shaping light around individuals, and I'm using the Peter Hurley triangle system. So if you're familiar with that, then you know that it's a beauty light setup, but it's with these 3 strip boxes that are set up in a triangular formation. And the idea of the lighting setup is relatively simple. The challenge is really making sure that the subject is not ahead of convergence and not too far behind convergence of the light. And if that got like super technical for you, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that, but that is something important to understand. And I'm still learning that. And, when you're doing portraits, you got to direct the client, because a lot of these people, they're not like professional models where a camera's always in front of them. Even though we always have a cell phone with a camera on it, they're just not sure. And so when we start talking about the light that's hitting them, we have to make the light really flatter the individual. And what I'm learning with headshot photography, when we talk about lighting the subject to enhance them, there are some people who have faces that light better on other sides. And that's not a rude thing. And that's never something that I would tell them during the session, right? It's a terrible line to drop during a photography session or a headshot session. You won't get very good expressions after that. But I notice it and I say, okay, hey, how about we turn this way? And why don't you tilt your head down this way? And, I go through a whole series of instructions for them that are simple, so that way I can get the light where it needs to be. So I'm enhancing them, because they can't see themselves until I show them the photos. So hopefully you found some value in that content. Again, if you want to jump into a one-on-one coaching call with me, go to freewillphotos.com, check the description box below. And of course, if you just want to watch videos about photo editing, you can check my YouTube channel out, Free Will Photos. And I have a lot of content on there, mostly around On One Photo Raw, because that is my primary editor of choice. But I do upload other videos on different software. If you got questions, email me. And until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.